Welcome to WKTV Journal's three-part series, Rewriting the Narrative of Mental Health. I'm Jessica Jones of Be Nice here in the Metro Grand Rapids area, and the purpose of this series is to eliminate the stigma surrounding mental illness, shed light on indicators and causes of depression, and discuss the best ways to approach and help those struggling with mental illness, and talk about available treatments and resources. We think you'll find the next hour hearing from those who live with various forms of mental illness, as well as clinicians and therapists, an enlightening and informative experience, and that learning the 4 simple steps of the Be Nice action plan from founder Christy will give you the confidence to take action. Thank you for joining us in striving to be part of the solution and rewriting the narrative of mental illness. All right, so we are here today talking about rewriting the narrative surrounding mental illness, mental health, and treatment. So let's start with some of the misconceptions that can lead to different stigma that surrounds those topics.
Well, I think a big one, especially for men or really independent people, is that they see it as a weakness or something that they don't want to admit to somebody because they might feel ashamed, or they might come from a family culture where you're supposed to just pick yourself up from your bootstraps and be strong and do it independently, or they might come from a very spiritual, religious home where you're supposed to just give it all to God and pray, and that if you're struggling, it's because of something wrong with you and your relationship with God. So kind of helping people with those barriers that might be in their mind, and letting them know that almost everybody at one time or another has struggled with anxiety or depression, and that there's help out there, and if you get help for yourself, then you can help other people too, and your family and friends.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like I've seen with the stigma that there's been some positive changes. Like the stigma is still there, so I don't want to confuse it with the stigma is not still there, because we see it in situations like our services are so specialized that someone who's looking for DBT therapy might be a doctor or might be a lawyer or someone that is prominent in the community, and then there's the stigma of, if I come with my children to group or for therapy here, what's that say about me? So that's part of the stigma that we still see, but some of the positive things that I've seen with stigma changing is all of the work that people do in the community, like your organization, what's done in the community is making it easier for people to come into therapy. And we definitely see it after events when, when someone's looking for services. So I think that is a good thing that should be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the education that the Mental Health Foundation does, I think, is really helpful. That it objectifies it, right? And also, I think in the last few years, the stigma people have really been coming out. I'm thinking of Senator Fetterman, who I just saw him on a talk show, and he said, it works, right? And so I think more and more people are coming out and normalizing that as
right.
More
okay.
celebrities. I think that's one of the very few good things that happened with COVID, was that so many people were clearly struggling with anxiety and depression, during those, early first months or, first couple of years with COVID, that people sought help. They needed help. And all of a sudden, I think all of us experienced this influx in people that were looking for treatment. And I think many of those people started to talk about that with their friends or their family members, and all of a sudden, I think it did. It had a noticeable impact on kind of normalizing seeking mental health treatment. So,
And with COVID, it made teletherapy much bigger and much easier. And so some people, if they want to avoid a waiting room or don't want anybody to see them going into an office, it makes it much easier for them. And sometimes people are scared to even just leave their home, and so teletherapy makes it much better for them.
Yeah. What would be some maybe misconceptions specific to getting treatment? Like, there's so many different kinds of treatment, and it is not all what you see in a movie where someone's laying down in a lounge chair and they're like, tell me about your problems. What are some, can you clear up some of those, and really what treatment can be or looks like.
I think one thing is people are afraid of judgment, being judged, right?
Right, true.
That this person may, I don't know, express some level of judgment. So, you know, a client goes in to see a therapist, and that person may be afraid of, like, what will this person think of me?
Yeah.
And so that's something like, you know, any good therapist or any therapist period should be, you know, kind of, how would I put it? Not, I guess, accepting or open to whatever the client is presenting
Right.
with, and should you know, not present in any sort of judgmental way. So I think, but that's one thing that people are worried about
Right, yeah.
before they go in to see somebody.
But Jess, I think you have a good point that there isn't just one set therapy. You can come in for parental guidance, like behavior management for your kids. Sometimes we'll even word it, if somebody has like a stigma about therapy, we'll word it as like consultation or coaching and
Okay.
things like that, and kind of gets it around that
Yeah.
whole old school
Right.
psychoanalytic therapy thing that
Right.
people might have in their head.
It seems like a more approachable term
Yeah.
for someone who's
Yeah.
considering. Okay.
Yep. And then find out what you really would be interested in. If you want somebody to help you with your thoughts and your behaviors, that'd be more like CBT, something more specific for like DBT, dialectical behavior. So do a little bit of Google search and see what's out there. And you can go on Psychology Today and see what people specialize in, what kind of populations that they really like working with. A big part of our program is working with the LGBT community, or somebody might specialize in teens who hurt themselves or cutting or things like that. So kind of look and see what your therapist kind of specializes in.
Yeah.
What I like about Psychology Today is everybody on there has a bio.
Yeah.
So you can kind of read and get an idea of how this person, I don't know, how they think, what they're like before you meet them, because a lot of times you are meeting, you know, you're going to meet this perfect stranger
Right,
that you don't really know anything about. So I think Psychology Today is it's better than picking a name out of the phone book for sure. You can get an idea of who it is.
Yes.
that
And a
I'm meeting.
picture. You
Yeah.
kind of know what your therapist
Right.
looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes a misconception is that we're just going to throw medication at something rather than addressing the issue. And obviously there's some things that we already know. Medication is the treatment of choice. Like, it's the best treatment along with therapy, but that's definitely a misconception. Or a misconception is that it's going to be a quick fix, an easy fix. You know, if a parent is already struggling with some conduct things, and by the time they get to our office, they're like, "Dear God, please, like, just make it better yesterday." And so it's a little off-putting for them that it's like, well, I got to first establish a relationship of trust. So it's not going to be fixed quickly, and so that, I think, is a misconception too.
To that point, why do you think that people are more hesitant to be on medication for mental health than for physical health? That seems to be like, I'm going to get put on medication. I don't want to be on this medication all the time. But someone would not hesitate to be on a physical medication for an ailment.
I think that goes back to the stigma of just thinking that it's not an okay thing, or that it's going to create more problems. And they really have to balance out, like, what's that more problems going to be? What's the cost to benefit ratio? People just don't know. And you can't know what you don't know. And they have to, you know, they're trusting us. They're trusting us to tell them and give them the best advice for their situation. So
And
if
we're
they
not
give us a chance.
physicians, but I think a lot of times people get afraid when they see those commercials and the long list of
Oh,
possible
yes.
side effects.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't realize is that from my experience working with people and from what I've read in the research is those side effects usually last like 3 weeks, then your body, your brain adapts to it. Or if you, like, I've tried a medication before, had bad effects from it, just tried a different one. So you can try it until you find a medication that works for you and is good for you. And people worry about getting addicted to them or it changing your personality, and I hardly ever see anything like that. I mean, I think that, especially with children with ADHD, I think lots of times parents are concerned, but even in my own family, we've seen kids who have really benefited from just like a small amount of Concerta or Adderall or something like that, just to help them be able to have control their bodies, control their mind, to focus and pay attention. It really helps them a ton in the long term. And they may not need it forever,
Right.
just for a little while to get over that hump at school and things like that.
I think that's another misconception too, is that if I get on this medication, I'm going to have to take it for the rest of my life versus
Right, yeah.
it might just be a short period of
To
time.
get me through this period, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going through a really dark period, or I see people that if they're going through a divorce or a death in the family, or speaking of suicide, if somebody in their family commits suicide, that just a little bit of a antidepressant can help them get through that, that dark time. And then the CBT or the therapy can teach you other coping skills to use, and then the combination of therapy and medication together
Right.
is the most helpful usually.
I like saying it just should take the edge off. It doesn't change your personality. If it changes your personality, if you're numbed out, okay, that dosage is not correct. It really should take the edge off so that you can maximize your therapy, so that you can get the most out of the therapy that you're doing.
Yeah, if somebody is really at a low point in their life, really struggling with significant depression, you know, what I talk to, you know, some of my clients about is that, you know, if they're down here, the medication can get them here,
Right,
and
yeah.
then there's less of a distance for them to get to where they want to be.
Right.
You know, so
That's-
from here to here, that can be a tall order.
Right.
So if the
Yeah.
medication can help them get here, then it's less, you know, less of a distance that they need to go to, you know, get where they want to be.
Kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
And to that point, the length of treatment. I think
Sure.
that's another thing that people may be hesitant about, or even maybe they go to 1 or 2, 3 therapy sessions, or, you know, they're like, I finally did this thing, but I don't feel any better
Right,
yet.
right.
So what would you say in
Can
those
take
regards?
a while. No, it can take a while. We are the world's most complicated and complex organism, you know, known to mankind. We're all different, and how long it's going to take, you know, for a certain person is how long it's going to take, and
Right,
you
yeah.
just gotta. And maybe it's not the right treatment provider. That's the big thing. I think that one thing I think I would like everybody to understand is that. Valencia, as you mentioned, you know, it's about forming the relationship, right? And so much of it is about feel.
Right.
And so if I feel comfortable with this person, that's the first step, right? Do I like going
Right,
to see this
yeah.
person? Do I enjoy my time working with this therapist or this counselor? If you don't, then you really should try to find another one. But then after that, it's does this person really have the skills, talents, and abilities to help me specifically? And
Right.
you know, I tell my people, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know everything. There are certain things that are, you know, outside of my capability at this point. And my job is, if we're at that point to where I'm like, okay, we're not making any progress, I'm trying to figure out, you know, what's going on, and look for somebody like Dr. Clark or Dr. Agnew, you know, that maybe I can refer this person to, that just, you know, has a greater level of knowledge, or Jim here, that has a greater level of knowledge than I do. So it can, you know, it's just, there's no straight path, you know, it just
Right,
depends on the
yeah.
person.
I think that's a really good point, because some people will go to see a therapist and it's not a good fit, and they'll say, I've tried therapy, it doesn't
Right.
work, right?
Right.
And so I tried, usually after my first session, I'll say, what do you think? Do you think we can work together? Because if it's not a good fit for you, it's not going to work, so I can refer you to somebody else. So,
Right, yeah. The length of therapy can vary too. Some people just need like 3 consultation sessions, make like a behavior plan for you. Some
Yep.
people need years of it and just need that support and that guidance and help through years. So I think it can really vary. And there might be periods in your life where you just do need a couple sessions check in, or there might be times in your life where you need something more intensive and a little bit more long term,
Right.
depending on what you're going through.
Let's just talk about affordability, because I know that's another stigma point too, where people think maybe getting mental health treatment is going to be too expensive, and it's a rich person thing to go to therapy.
Depends on your insurance,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
yeah.
One of the things that we have at our office, because it really was important to me that our services be available to people who can't afford it. And and not all insurances pay for therapy, or the deductibles are so high, it might as well not be in, you know, insurance. So we have interns at our office so that clients can be seen at a lower rate, a much lower rate. And I tell people, you know, well, our admins tell people when they call in that our interns are not just somebody we grab off the street, that they are master's level interns, and I require that they do DBT training. They can't be an intern at my office if they're not willing to put in the time of training prior to seeing clients, because I want our clients to be able to receive the best services. So that's one of the ways that we try and help with that.
Yeah, that's great.
But insurance is just,
Right.
you know, it is what it is, and
it's a
that's
big-
unfortunate.
And one of the worst things is, you know, a lot of times financial stress is a part of why a person is
Yeah,
struggling, right? And so, you know, a person comes in to see, you know, they come in to see me, and it turns out, yeah, they've got a $10,000 deductible or whatever that, you know, none of these sessions are going to get covered, you know, in the next year. And all of a sudden, you know, you're faced with this decision: do I continue to see this person and bill them, and you know, where I'm making the money I'm supposed to make,
Right, yeah.
or do I see this person for free or at a far less, you know, reduced rate, in order for that person to continue to come see this, you know, to receive the help that they're looking for, and for that, I just, like, you're put in this position to where you have to make a decision. Well, do I just say, sorry, you have to pay what you have to pay, and then that person could very well leave and just not get the help they're looking
Right,
for?
yeah.
Or, you know, we take a hit, and that's just, you know, I mean, I guess that's the way the world works these days, but
Right.
I really wish that insurance somehow just removed the deductible piece for mental
For
health.
mental health,
Yeah,
yeah.
I really do.
But I think on the other hand, a good point is a lot of people don't even realize that their insurance may cover mental health. When I was younger and just started working and had insurance of my own for the first time, I didn't go to a therapist, partly because I didn't even know that they took insurance or that my insurance would pay for that. I just knew insurance going to a medical doctor. And also, if you're on straight Medicaid, there's not even a copay or a deductible to worry about. So some people think, oh, well, I'm struggling too much financially, I'm on Medicaid, but that's actually, if you can find a therapist that is currently taking Medicaid, that's the easiest to go because there's no copay.
Okay.
Plus, people can look into HSA accounts. Like, I personally have a high deductible, but I put away a little bit of money in my HSA and use that for different things. So we can do that. There's other options out there too that you can look into. There's different places have foundations. I know when I worked at Pine Rest, they had a foundation to help people. You can go through like Network 180, Arbor Circle, places like that. You just gotta kind of look
there are
around and
options
try to
out there.
find what's out there. And I mean, also you have to think of it as an investment, you know? I mean, I pay cash when I go to my physical therapist, to my chiropractor, because it's an investment, a long-term investment and your mental health. If you find a really good therapist, it's definitely worth that $30 copay, or even some have to pay more than that, but long term it's going to benefit you a ton.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about age. So mental illness does not discriminate, and as far as even just like young ages, I think sometimes parents might have a hard time grasping that a young child, maybe 10 or even younger, could be struggling with their mental health. But is it possible
Is what possible?
that kids younger than 10 are struggling with mental illness or
Yeah.
mental health concerns that might be?
Especially during COVID and the effects of COVID. Yeah. Yep. And the increase of divorce and domestic violence and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, the research has shown kids are more anxious now than they've ever been in this country. And so I think a lot of little kids may not have the words to express it, but if you look at the signs, they're going through a lot of anxiety or stress or depression or pressure at school, things like that, peer relations.
Yeah. What are some of the signs that parents can look for, even with kids that are middle school, high school, college age too?
It varies, but I would say paying attention to when there's a change in patterns, you know, over a 2-week span of time. And that may even mean paying attention to the child who previously didn't do well in school or was a problem, but now all of a sudden over the past couple of weeks they're no longer a problem, because they can become invisible and you're not paying attention and thinking, oh, thank God I'm not getting a call from the school this week, and not realize that child is now disappearing more and more susceptible to suicide, or that there's mental health issues going on. So changes in eating and sleeping and schoolwork, changes in language, if they don't have things to look forward to, you know, that they're not looking forward to the future of, this is what I'm going to do when I go to high school or when I graduate or the next basketball game. You know, those type of things are important signs to notice. And even when you know, I want to say that even when parents and people in general can notice a lot of signs, it's also possible to miss signs. So I don't want it to sound like, here's all the signs, and everyone should always recognize the signs because they're there. It is also possible to miss signs and not know it just because of day-to-day life things.
And our initial conversation and topic about how, and I think you had brought up about how it's more common, I think a lot of teenagers now are just telling their parents, you know what, I'm super depressed and I want to go to a therapist. They might talk to their friends who have a really good therapist and are getting good results, and a lot of teenagers come home and they're like, Mom, I need to talk to somebody, get me in. And then the mom, usually the mom, sometimes the dad picks up the phone right away and calls us and tries to get an appointment for them. But I think like isolating themselves, they just seem down, more angry, even with little kids, temper tantrums, things like that, crying a lot, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to go places that they used to like, violence towards themselves or other people or stuff like that.
What would you say for a young person who might be watching who, like you said, they're now going to their parents and they are like, I am struggling, like I need to talk to somebody, I need some kind of treatment, but maybe there's a barrier for them with their parents where their parents might think it's just a phase, or it's just what it's like to be a teenager, or like what advice would you give those
I would
families?
say check in with your school counselor for sure. And a lot of schools now will have groups like anxiety groups or friendship groups or like an LGBT support group. And I would look into different things like that, free support groups in the community.
Okay.
Even saying to a parent, even if it is a phase, what harm will it do for me to go and have someone help me? Because that's important. It's, even if it is a phase, okay, you know, who couldn't benefit from having some support during a phase? You know, have you ever been angry and had a friend just chat with you while you're angry? And it's like, whew, okay, I'm better now. So there's a benefit to that. Like, you don't lose anything, even if it is a phase. So I would encourage them to say that to their parents.
Well, also, kids under 18, and I can't remember if there's a certain age that they can go, but kids under 18 up to a certain point are able to seek treatment on their own without the consent.
Permission.
Yeah, 14 to 18, up to 6 sessions without parental consent.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not like you don't want it to be that way, but if you do have a parent that's not,
that's resistant to it.
But it can also be helpful for the parents to come in and talk to a therapist about their children.
Yeah.
Right.
Hear my concerns, and they can say, oh, this is a phase, or how long has it been going on, and give them some guidelines of you know, what to look for. And,
Right.
Great. So we talked about some of the signs of mental illness. Let's talk about causes of mental illness, or what are things that can, you know, where does mental illness begin, and what can trigger possible escalation of a mental illness? Maybe going from what might start as a concern to progressing to a possible crisis.
think we probably all could pull out a scroll,
Yeah, right.
you know, depending on what the issue might be, because it could be genetic. So knowing that if someone in your family has a history of depression, then pay attention because you might have some depression as well. So knowing that component, but there's also things like trauma that you can be going along, skipping through life fine, and trauma happens and it shakes everything up.
Yeah.
So then you need therapy because of that situation. And it doesn't even have to be trauma that you experienced yourself. It can be vicarious trauma, which just means the trauma of watching the news every day or hearing the trauma situations and kids and even adults, you know, being afraid themselves. So trauma can trigger the need for mental health treatment or having just general events that can happen in life that we're all wired differently, and one of us, all of us here, we could have the same situation happen and we come out with 5 different outcomes of how we were impacted
yeah.
because we're wired differently or because we were brought up differently.
I think what's key too is have conversations with your kids, like open conversations about things that are going on in the world and things that they may come across, and just let them know that we're here for you. You can come and talk to us. We know you're 13, you want to be alone in your room, but you can come and talk to us and tell us what's going on in your life. But then I think also trying to buffer your kids as much as possible, because especially like in divorce situations, I see where parents are just so completely inappropriate around their children, like degrading the other parent or using the children to punish the other parent, and just trying to keep, like, you might be going through your own trauma with this divorce, but you got to protect your kids.
What would you say, just on the conversation front too, for parents to have with any parent to have with a kid, a conversation just about mental health? How would you suggest that they open up that conversation? And it could be, as you know, sitting at the dinner table, like, hey, I just want to talk to you about this, and if this ever happens with the way you're thinking, acting, feeling.
I think
what
normalizing it. Like I often tell parents, well, when I was younger, I was on these different kinds of medications, or I went through depression, or our cousin committed suicide. That was super hard. So I think kind of normalizing, maybe if parents can share, like, hey, when I was younger, I felt depressed, or I had an abusive boyfriend, or I struggled with an eating disorder. Just letting the kids know, like, oh, mom and dad went through this. They got some help. They got through it. I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a complete weirdo for experiencing these things. Just kind of normalizing it and keeping that communication open.
Yeah.
I think role modeling is an excellent way for parents to have the conversation with their children. Like before there's even ever an issue, role modeling mental health themselves, of when they're stressed, that they need to do self-care, or that it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to have a variety of emotions. I love using TV shows or movies as an example with kids. You know, if we're watching something and it's like, oh my gosh, did you see how they felt in that?
Yeah.
And it becomes a teachable moment
Empathy.
to practice and role model it. So that's a great way to start a conversation and normalize with kids. And then you can always ask them the general questions of, how are you doing with all the things that are going on in the news? How are your friends doing? You know, are you noticing anything happening? Because it kind of takes the focus off of them.
I'm traumatized by the news right now.
Yes.
I got to stop listening to it.
Yes, I definitely have put it on my no watch list. And so those type of things, asking them to tell you about the highlights of their day. What were the highs? What were the lows? Versus how was your day? You know, tell me the high of your day. What was the low? And then you start to normalize it, so that when you have to have the big conversations, it's normal.
Yeah, that's great advice. Let's talk about the digital factor that plays a heavy role in the majority of people's lives. I feel like would be safe to say, whether that's you know, you're on your computer for work, you have a phone in your pocket, or within reach pretty much 24/7, and social media maybe being blasted with notifications throughout the day, like you talked about news, like even if you're, you know, getting Twitter notifications or whatever it might be, like you're constantly being stimulated. Have you noticed just the impact of that with any of your clients or in your practices?
Yeah. I think for one thing, we know way more about what's going on in everybody's life and in their lives. And it's not just a kid thing, but adults also have that feeling about being left out. Or I see all the good things in this person's life and I think, oh, they have a perfect, amazing life. And sometimes I'll even look at Facebook and I'll be like, whoa, this close friend of mine, it looks like they have the perfect, most amazing life. But I know these things that they're struggling with in their life, that it's not all perfect and glamorous as it looks like on social media. But I think teenagers are not able to kind of filter that out as much.
Right. With Be Nice too, and when we're in the classrooms, like something that you maybe didn't experience yourself, because I don't even know that I really experienced this, but like when I left school at the end of the day, that was all at school and behind me, and I was able to disconnect and go home, and it was a new atmosphere, new people. I didn't have to worry about what everyone was doing after school or...
Yeah, we had one phone on the wall in the kitchen and then one phone in your parents' room you couldn't touch, so it was way simpler back then.
I think I had 300 texts I could send a month, like receive and get, so they were just like used so sparingly.
Right, yeah.
So it wasn't like you were in constant communication, but, and obviously there are good things that can lead to, but then there are the negative effects too.
Yeah,
So.
positive and negative.
So just the amount of information that is coming at us today, you know, compared to 100 years ago, it's shocking. I mean, so you know, I just think that we're really having a hard time. Like life is difficult. Life is difficult enough, right? And then you throw this massive amount of information that's coming at us all day long through our phones, through our computers, television, whatever. You know, just the pace of life seems to have increased exponentially. How is that not having an impact, you know, on, like, we feel more overwhelmed, increasingly overwhelmed and increasingly unable to cope, more stressed out, more anxious? I do. I think the digital age, I mean, while it does a lot of good, I mean, you know, in certain ways, I think it's
more
really causing us.
There's more polarity, more
there's,
separation.
absolutely. There's all that. You think about the bullying thing, right? You know, when I was in school, if you had a bully that you're dealing with, you dealt with them from, you know,
in the hallways.
at school. But now it can be 24/7, and the impact that can have.
I think the corollary of that is also that there's less social connection. There's
real
people have
connection,
less family around, and I think they use media for communication versus hanging out with people. You know,
we've all gone to dinner and seen the people at the table next to us that are just like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of put your phones away.
I think people are still suffering from COVID. There's things in my life that I love doing that are completely canceled or now just are starting to build up again that were big parts of my life. And during COVID, I had moved from downtown Grand Rapids to a beautiful area, but was completely isolated. So it was, I think, that isolation. And a lot of people in my personal life and in my office have been talking about how lonely they feel. Like a lot of people are feeling really, really lonely right now in life.
Yeah, that screen doesn't provide
The
what you
real
get from human connection on the other side, despite, like, you might know, you know, the glamorized things that someone's been up to.
The kids who are on social media a lot, they struggle with social skills. Like, they struggle to learn how to manage their emotions, even to the extent of that when they don't have the social media, they don't have the things that they can do, they're left with anxiety, like, what do I do? What else is there to do? It's like, I don't know, read a book or something, but that's what I did when there was the one phone hanging in the kitchen and the cord only reached that far. You know,
Art supplies, reading.
Go play outside with
Yeah,
friends,
a lot more outdoor
basketball,
activity.
I don't know, something.
There's so much to do.
But they you know, they struggle with it, and unless parents are active in monitoring it and having them engaged in other things, it's difficult, and it can become an easy babysitter too.
Right. I think
You know, to just do the
encouraging
social
lots of my
media.
adolescents, I have to really encourage them to join the chess club or it doesn't have to be sports. Sports can be good, but it doesn't have to be that. There's lots of other activities and groups because lots of times they're resistant to do it. They either are being kind of lazy and don't want to take the effort, or they're afraid, or they're negative about it. And then once they join these clubs and these groups or activities, they really like it a lot and they get a lot out of it. And there's more to life than just being on your technology all the time.
So something that we really highly encourage through Be Nice is that every student is a part of at least one thing
Okay.
as a piece of resilience. So like you just said, it doesn't have to be a sport. It can be any kind of club, and it doesn't even have to be at school. It can be your youth group at
Some
church.
love 4-H and church youth group.
Exactly. There are so many things, and those are such great protective factors in your life. That human connection, feeling a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
What are some other things that you could recommend to parents and that will help make their kids resilient? And that's, you know, from young ages to teenage years.
I think fostering relationships with other adults. I think that's an important piece. Kids, I mean, parents are heroes up to a certain point, and then they don't know anything, right? And so having another adult in their life, I think, can be really helpful. Be it a coach or aunt or an uncle or something like that.
Yeah, someone they trust and can talk to.
Yeah.
Someone you trust too. others.
And if there isn't somebody available, just out there I saw a poster about mentors, getting a mentor. So I find that can be really helpful. Especially kids who one parent may be estranged and not in their life, then finding a mentor of that gender that they don't have in their life.
Transitioning to maybe someone in your life is struggling, and this could be a child, it could be a spouse, significant other, a coworker. What are some of those warning signs of someone possibly being suicidal, and are there things that you can put into place in your life if you're struggling, or if you notice that someone is struggling, to help lessen someone completing the act of suicide?
Well, I think one thing that I try to help people with is don't tell them I know exactly how you feel and think, because we don't. And lots of times people, it's kind of like the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book, that a lot of times people don't want you to fix their problem or tell them what to do. You can give them suggestions and talk to them about, well, like, what do you think about this? But lots of times people just want somebody to listen to and then reflect back to them what they're saying. Like, it sounds like you're going through this. Or it sounds like you're thinking this, without us saying, well, you need to just do this and this and this and tell them what to do and fix the problem. I think that lots of times when we love somebody and we care about them, we want to give them the answer and the fix, but really they just need somebody to listen to them.
I would want, if someone even had an inclining that someone is struggling, to ask them, how are you doing? Are you feeling suicidal? Have you thought about suicide? Because 9 out of 10 times they're gonna tell you, and it's not contagious. Like, you're not gonna make someone suicidal by asking, you know. We could ask each other, and it's none of us are gonna walk out of here feeling suicidal because someone explored that question with us. So not being afraid to just have the conversation with someone, along with the other things of signs, and, you know, paying attention. Are they getting rid of things, or, you know, patterns changing, those type of things. Just have a conversation.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes I think we forget in that technology age, and just how far a relationship goes, to just have someone, you know, be concerned and sit down and hold space for you to have that conversation. And not everyone can hold space. I get that. Holding the space, maybe I can't hold the space for my child, but you could. Because maybe I might be all in my feelings, so I can't hold the space. and someone else could hold the space to have that conversation. If I know I can't hear the truth and I'm maybe gonna make it worse, that's okay, because you can hold space and have that conversation. So
Right,
even making sure that there's, that you can hold the space when you ask those questions. Like, be prepared.
That lowers the
for
stigma
real-
in their head. That normalizes it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because as a parent, like, you might notice these things, but you just do not want to know the answer if it's what you think it could be.
Right, yeah.
And it would be, too painful or too hard, or you wouldn't know what to say, or you don't feel like you want to mess it up. So I feel like that's really good advice.
Yeah. And
What
keep
are-
your eyes and ears open. Like, check out their body, see if they're cutting themselves, see if they're eating. I think even just the family dinner, and it's not a criticism of families, because I know people are super busy and sports and everything, but I think just even that ritual of having a family dinner, as many people in the family as you can to sit down, that even just trying to get that ritual back. I mean, we used to have a Sunday dinner at my grandma's house almost every Sunday, and almost every night we would try to eat together, and I think a lot of families feel that they're unable to do that, but I think if we can add some of those old school traditions back into our lives, it can really help the people in our family.
Yeah. Even if, I know families are busy with, they've got multiple kids and they're all in sports or band or whatever it might be, and maybe you spend a lot of time in the car together,
Right, yeah.
and that can be your space where it's like, we're not on devices, we're talking
Right.
to each other about.
Yeah, and the research has shown that that's a great place to talk to a teenager, because if they can just stare out the window and not look at you, they're more apt to talk.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's interesting
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I call it the hostage situation. And it's like, ooh, this is my opportunity to ask all kinds of questions. Or if parents can chaperone or something where they get to be the drivers, and then you get to eavesdrop in the conversations that are happening in the back seat, and you kind of get a feel for what's going on,
true.
what are some of the issues.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to ask.
A little bit of an investigator.
Yes. Yeah. And along with that investigation is making it clear. You talked about what's going on online with kids being
Yeah.
victims, and making it clear to your children. I personally feel that privacy is a privilege, it's not a right. And I give you that privilege until I have a reason to investigate further. And you don't get to have your little private computer, and when I come around, you're like, oh, close it. Okay, that now means you've lost that privilege, because I need to know what you were trying to hide from me. And so having access to the information is what has been a rule for my household. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna look, because pretty much I don't care about the things that they're talking about, the latest concert or something. I'm not gonna go spying or checking unless I have a reason. And when I'm worried about your life and your safety, that's a reason, and I will check whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to play that bad guy role. Whether,
You like it or
you're
not.
invading my privacy, but it's safety.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think one parent I know said that this is my phone. I pay for this phone. This is not your phone. Right. I'm going to let you use your phone today, and they put timestamps on it. Like, you got a half hour of social media or whatever that limit is, so that they know, and to check in on from time to time, because it's wide open, right? I mean, the internet is, yeah. So,
yeah, everything is accessible
yeah.
nowadays.
Hmm.
Definitely.
And I think trying to stay calm, like one thing I teach parents is try to keep a flat affect, and this is with younger kids mostly, but using as few words as possible. Try not to get sucked into the power struggles. Try not to take anything they say personally.
Right.
They're going to say, I hate you, you're not my parent, you can't come to my birthday party. And some parents just get sucked into that, like, I do so much for you, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm like, the kid's 3. He's in 2 seconds, he's going to be like, I love you, Mommy. Like, we can't take it personal. But I know it's hard, but just trying to stay logical and rational and as calm as possible. I like a lot of using like love and logic, positive discipline. For ADHD, Russell Barkley's got some great books. For adults, a great book and manual is Driven to Distraction. There's lots of good resources out there.
Great, yeah. For someone who might notice signs that are concerning in like a fellow adult, like what are some of those signs that people can look for that are changes, and how do you have that conversation with an adult versus a kid, where someone might be more intimidated if it's maybe a coworker, if their significant other is maybe kind of blowing them off, but they like you feel in your gut something is wrong. What are some reactions that are?
I see social isolation and just kind of that anhedonia, that lack of interest and pleasure in things that they used to enjoy. It's like, hey, aren't you going? No, I'm not going. It's. I think social isolation, especially for men that I work with, that's a huge factor. And, that's one of the warning signs. Watching their sleep patterns. Of course, if you're a friend or a colleague, you don't actually know that, or probably wouldn't know that. Irritability, right, or anger, using more substances in the past, or beginning to use substances. Some of those things, fatigue or lack of concentration, or just that I don't care attitude. It's like whatever,
Even some of the words that they say, right? Indicating hopelessness or helplessness.
Yeah.
So something like, it's never going to get better. My life is, never going to get better, or there's nothing I can, there's nothing I can do to make things better. Just, I guess like having so if you're seeing something like my friend is, who I used to get together with a lot, or used to be very jovial, all of a sudden is isolated and withdrawn and is kind of checked out. So I check in on him, how you doing? And we start talking, and all of a sudden I'm starting to hear things that are concerning, then to go to Dr. Agnew, what you said is, you can ask, you're not going to plant a seed, you can ask that question. Are you having any thoughts about hurting yourself?
Yeah, I think asking, like, because we have a friend who is having some neurological problems, so I just took him aside and said, hey, it's never been a really good opportunity for me to ask you, but how are you doing? He was like, wow, thank you so much, because I feel like some people are kind of avoiding the topic. And so I think just checking in, because I think sometimes we feel like, oh, nobody really even cares what I'm going through. And sometimes it can feel like that, like everybody's got something like that they're going through, like I don't want to bother them with my problem, but I think just kind of checking in with a friend and saying like, how are you doing?
Yeah, even the people who might, like you just said, like people are kind of noticing these changes, but they're intimidated to say something, and maybe how that makes the person on the other end feel like, I can tell that they notice these things in me, but no one will say anything to me.
My mom's got a great one. She's always done with my siblings and me is like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about? And then you're like, oh, I'm thinking about how this guy hasn't called me back, or I'm thinking about how my friend didn't invite me to go out with them. And because sometimes if people don't ask, we think like, oh, they don't care.
Right.
Another thing we do in our family is we'll just say like, hey, can I pray for you about this? Or can I pray with you about this? Or we'll send each other little like Christian or spiritual things that we think might be uplifting for them and helpful.
We lead lifestyles that are far more sedentary than we should. We're hunter-gatherers, that human beings have not evolved as quickly as society has, so we're still stuck with this same brain and body that we had 10,000 years ago when we really were hunter-gatherers. And yet our society today is set up to where we move as little as possible. We drive everywhere.
Sitting.
We use the remote control to turn our television. I mean, that we sit at our desks, and I think that's taking a toll. I think we're born to move.
And being out in nature.
Be out in nature, walking.
That was one
running.
thing with COVID, bringing teenagers and adults outside more for therapy. I found it a lot better than just staring at me in a boring office. Like getting out in nature, teenagers talk more.
So that's a big thing that we do at my practice is we incorporate the use of exercise as a valid form of mental health treatment. That all of the research that's been going on for the past many years has established physical exercise and movement as being as effective, generally speaking, as counseling and medications.
Right.
And I think it's because we're doing what our bodies are designed to do, to move, to run, to lift, to hunt and to gather. And what's good for our brain. I mean, there's all these physiological changes that occur with our bodies and our brains when we exercise. And it's certainly something that we want, we would love to see people utilize more because it's cheap, it's effective, there's no side effects. Actually, the side effects are really good.
I hate working out, but I feel so much better after I do it, and I feel crummy when I don't do it. In fact, I'm skipping the gym to do this today, so but
Exactly.
I'm going to make sure that I
Yeah.
do something tonight, some kind of movement activity.
And we look at our society, and we're rates of obesity are increasing, and so we've got to figure something out. And I think we've got to figure out ways to move more and to be more active. And because obviously everybody knows the physical health benefits, but not many people know like the mental health benefits are actually even greater than the physical health benefits.
It's like they release serotonin
yeah.
and dopamine and all
endorphins
of that.
and brain BDNF and
I still
all this
don't like to exercise.
Sure.
I know. Well, you can help your self-image.
Once you get yourself to do it, you're like,
You
why
never-
do I have to
You
battle
never regret
myself to
it.
do this?
You never
But-
regret a workout. Like you
Yeah.
drag your butt to the gym
Yes.
and then afterwards you're like, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yep.
You asked like what things are contributing, and I definitely think we should not forget the huge impact that 2020 had on everyone.
Yeah.
And the year started out already like, oh my gosh, what? Kobe Bryant.
Politics.
Just all of, yes. There's so much with that there was like individual losses that maybe we experienced, if any of you, but individual, and then collectively as a world. And the grieving process changed. I know my brother passed during 2020, and we could only have a total of 10 people in the funeral home. So I couldn't even grieve the way that I normally would have grieved by having all of his friends there and speaking well of him and saying things. It's like all of that. At the end of 2020, like 2021 hit, and I called my therapist, and it's like, I need to have 2 sessions a week. And he talks a little bit. He's like, you don't need 2 sessions a week. It's like, no, I need 2 sessions a week. We're going to meet 2 sessions a week. Well, I guess we ended up with 1 a week, but just the same. It's like even as therapists or helping professionals, depression going up. I don't know about all of you, but if you had any, nurses or doctors that you saw and all of that and the toll that it took on their relationships and going home afterwards, that it just, depression really just kind of skyrocketed, and our therapist went from seeing people for real once a week to twice a week because people needed more help to cope. And it's like we were seeing, it was painful because we were seeing our wait list increase because our therapists were seeing their already clients twice a week, so they couldn't take in new therapists because everyone just started to struggle so much. So
and I wonder if there's almost like this collective, post-traumatic stress disorder response, right? Where there's almost this sense of like uneasiness that I feel, right?
Yeah,
like
uneasiness.
where we're just, this sense that anything can happen. Whereas we knew that before, at least in my lifetime. I've never went through anything like that before, but now going through that. Now I know
it can.
It can.
Right.
And I have this sense of like, dis-ease today, knowing who knows what the rest of my life and what the rest of my daughter's life and what what's to come. But I feel it today, whereas before, it was like, oh, things are good, life is good, everything's fine, and now it's like we know better
Right.
now.
Are you safe at school?
Sure.
You know,
Sure. Right.
you know, I had a period of time thinking about, it's like, you know, maybe I need to get like one of those little pins that monitors how your day is going, so I can like hear if anything is happening.
Listening, okay, spying on her.
But not really
Yeah.
to spy, more so.
I think for me,
you know,
it first came with the Twin Towers, and then I worked in New York City after the Twin Towers.
Wow.
So that, I think that's the first time, and I was a preschool teacher at the time, and parents ran in, grabbed their kids, and ran out, because my school was right next to the Sears Tower, and they thought the Sears Tower was going to be attacked. And so I think that's when I first started feeling like, wow, anything terrible could just come out of the blue, and we really have no power over it. And I think with COVID, all of us felt like we have no control of this, no power, especially before vaccines came out and things like that.
Yeah, grieving, loss of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to add just in general for people watching?
Oh, there's lots of suicide prevention hotlines, and now you can even text. I think you text 988 or and then you can get a instant crisis hotline person to help you. And the Trevor Project has it for LGBT teenagers that they can contact free 24 hours a day.
Yeah, we have a partnership with the crisis text line. Text
Okay.
NICE to 741-741,
Oh, okay.
which is another one that there's a trained crisis counselor on the other end, ready to facilitate.
Yeah. I used those when I was younger. Went through my first bad breakup in Chicago.
Yeah, a lot of the crisis text line is more emotional distress. Like, I
Yeah.
just need someone who's removed from the situation to hear me out,
Right.
so I can vent.
And it's 3 in the morning, I have nobody to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah, our clients have that in the DBT program.
Oh, there's lots of suicide prevention hotlines, and now you can even text. I think you text 988 or and then you can get a instant crisis hotline person to help you. And the Trevor Project has it for LGBT teenagers that they can contact free 24 hours a day.
Yeah, we have a partnership with the crisis text line. Text
Okay.
NICE to 741-741,
Oh, okay.
which is another one that there's a trained crisis counselor on the other end, ready to facilitate.
Yeah. I used those when I was younger. Went through my first bad breakup in Chicago.
Yeah, a lot of the crisis text line is more emotional distress. Like, I
Yeah.
just need someone who's removed from the situation to hear me out,
Right.
so I can vent.
And it's 3 in the morning, I have nobody to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I see our statistics on our website, and the middle of the night is when someone's been awake for hours, and then they're
That's what I
accessing
see
our Get
too.
Help page. And it really is typically 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So just the importance of knowing like those 24/7 numbers that you can reach, like when
For
you need
sure.
it, is just so important, because people are out there waiting to help you.
Jessica, you started out saying that this was about change the narrative, and I think that's something that I would want viewers to really think about, is that they can change the narrative, and you change the narrative by doing something. You know, do something, go talk to someone. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't see some payoffs from it, because I need to see people get better and change. You know, that's important. And they can change the narrative by increasing their knowledge, their education on different topics, and just having a support system, building resiliency. We talked about that. Any of those things can change the narrative, literally change the narrative. And it's, you know, it's not always easy to do, but it is possible to do, and it is well worth the investment. You know, you get to go from just existing to living. You know, you get to get more out of life, and why wouldn't you want to get more out of life if it's possible? So do something, change the narrative.
That's good.
And it gives you more control over things that you didn't have, and like a greater sense of empowerment over yourself than you had before. I'm more aware of my thinking now, and I'm more aware of what I can do, you know, in terms of like, I'm thinking this way, and I can change my thinking, I can address it. I think that's one of the best things about going to see a therapist or a counselor is that it really is, it's like you're empowering yourself to
We even get to know what our limits are, knowing that I can't keep watching the news.
Right,
It's
right.
too much for me. And
yeah.
and the more self-aware you become, you also know what your limits are.
This
and you can say, I
relationship.
can't.
This relationship isn't healthy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm maybe supposed to be in this relationship, it's not healthy for me. So I
Right.
need to decide to exit this relationship or set firm boundaries in this
And
relationship.
it changes the narrative
Mm-hmm.
just by taking that step. Yeah.
That's great.
That's true.
And thank you all for sharing your expertise with us. An unprecedented number of people have reported symptoms of anxiety and depression since the COVID pandemic began. Recognizing the warning signs of depression and suicide can help you know when to seek help and take steps to prevent suicide. If you know of someone struggling with mental illness, please don't hesitate to reach out for guidance on how to help and how to be a part of the solution. If you are personally struggling with a form of mental illness, please know that you are not alone. There are people who care and are willing to help you. It is okay to seek their guidance and share your feelings. We hope this has been helpful for you in some way and that you were able to learn something new. Thank you for listening to our broad discussion about rewriting the narrative on mental illness.